right. Aftershocks Tremors. Matt and Chris here with you guys for another crazy kick-ass discussion. Hey, Chris, what's going on, man? How are you?
What is up, man? Well, we just did a show before the show.
We kind of did. I know, about an hour about bitching about all our bad week that we're having so far.
Yeah,
Both of us are kind of weird week, but no, it's good to be talking music though. That'll hopefully kind of put us in a little bit better spirits right now.
Certainly.
Yeah, I love that. Your backdrop there. I always like when you put that up with all those different
With
bands
all
on
the
there.
bands and stuff on it. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of cool because there's even some bands in there I see that I'm like, oh man, is that even really a metal band? You know, like White Stripes is in there, NERD, Nerd, whatever the hell. I remember that band. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
But no, the reason why I'm bringing that up too is because that's kind of what we're doing with the show today. We're going to be talking about genrefication of rock music.
Okay.
Obviously that's always, I think, a good topic. People always like to talk about because the word genre, it's kind of a loose term. You got subgenre, which is a little bit more firm, but yet kind of loose. You've got, there's all this genrefication that's been going on in rock and metal over years and stuff.
You can no longer just say, well, they're a metal band. You can't,
exactly.
You can't say that. You got to be like, well, you know what? They're a European new metal.
Yeah.
You got to have all these terms behind it now. Just saying, yeah, they're fucking metal.
Yeah, no, it's nuts, man. I mean, just to do a quick little review of even what a genre is.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it's a French word. I think it means kind or sort, I believe is what the word genre means. And really the definition is it's like a socially agreed upon, conventions that develop over time that really basically helps the public make sense out of an, unpredictability when it comes to, artistic expression, aka music. And of course, I think the word unpredictability in that right there is the key word because really, I mean, the reason why people, I guess, look at genres or they even, it matters to them is because, I mean, like anybody, I guess, they don't want to waste their time listening to something they don't like. Or on the flip side, they want to find something that they may indeed do like.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you do attach a label or a genre to it, it kind of, I guess, gets rid of all these other bands that you don't really care about. You want to obviously focus or look for something that's in a specific, it has a specific sound or a specific attitude that's, towards it. And it's something that I guess that's why people really kind of clamor on sometimes to genres, even though I think that's, they're kind of a bit overdone, overrated.
Oh boy, you ain't lying, dude. I hate it. To me, it's either metal or it's not. I'll be honest. I don't give a shit if it's new metal or desert rock or or classic metal or thrash metal or death. It's metal. It's not in my head. And I'll tell you exactly why, because you can't, it changes. One of our mutual friend, Bob Nalbandian, him, I, and Joe MacGyver, the author, we did a podcast eons ago. I mean, probably 10, 15 years ago, I guess it was. Whenever Joel put out his book about the 100 greatest guitarists.
Okay.
And it turned into a big argument. It was the 100 best, greatest metal guitarists.
Okay.
And it turned into an argument about what is exactly metal. And it was really Bob and Joel, and I was just poking both bears to watch them fight with each other.
Okay.
But the band was Deep Purple.
Okay.
And that was the big argument. Joel was like, that's not metal. And Bob was like, well, of course it's metal. It's one of the originators of metal, and it was like this whole argument of where does it fit in the subgenre now? Is it classic rock? Is it metal? Whatever. And it's like, well, it's kind of both.
Yeah.
It started as metal back when Deep Purple came out, and what'd you have before? Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
I mean, they were metal. That was a metal band.
Well, you could also, but you could also argue, that they're not. But see, my opinion is they're more of sort of like a proto metal type of band, because if you look at even early Deep Purple, that wasn't even close to metal. The first go around with Deep Purple. And so, with Hush and all that was nowhere near metal. That was just simply classic rock.
Sure.
Yes, when the Mach 2 came in, and obviously when Gillan came in, different, Roger Glover, different band. So a
Yeah.
different sound, different, players, all that. They were, yes, you can, obviously listen to a song like Highway Star. You could say that's an early, intro to metal. That's why
Mhm.
I always think, to me, proto metal's, to me, sort of the roots of metal, where really it started getting heavy, you
Sure.
know, and so I tend to think of, Deep Purple in that,
Sure.
with
But
in that
again,
regard.
it goes to it, and it goes, and this is why I have a problem with bands, just like you're saying. So, what is Deep Purple? Are they or aren't they? They kind of yes and no. Some is,
Mm-hmm.
some isn't. Judas Priest, another prime example. Judas Priest in the 70s, definitely not what you would consider metal. Judas
No.
Priest in the 80s, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
metal band.
Absolutely. I mean, that's personified metal. Well, I mean, if we just just even take a look back at rock history, right? I mean, think about how rock derived, right? I mean, there was genres before rock. So
Yeah,
rock really came essentially from rhythm and blues and jazz, right?
sure.
It started basically of a blending of two genres
Hmm.
to create this now new sound. All right. If we look at, so when rock started, obviously, we got to go back to obviously the 50s, right? You had the whole roots of rock in the 50s, a Little Richard, Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, the black artists. Then after that, you had Elvis, you had Bill Haley, you had Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, you had, obviously it started morphing into that kind of, the regular, just roots of rock,
Sure.
rock and roll sound. Now the 60s, obviously, you had the Beatles. They were obviously, that's why they're such a unique thing, because they blended every type of freaking music that was out there
Right.
into rock,
Mhm.
right? But really, though, you started, when metal started coming up, or like had Bob, speaking of Bob, that he mentioned obviously in his videos, his great videos. It started with guys, and even with Sam Dunn did his, the metal
Banger
evolution,
video.
whatever, metal evolution. Yeah. You had John, in the UK, you had that whole blues explosion, right? Those
Sure.
bands in the UK that took that sound from the Robert Johnsons and the Howlin' Wolves and sort of just put a modern twist on it. John Mayall, the Yardbirds, Cream, Fleetwood Mac,
Right.
Jethro Tull, all those bands, right? So here in the States, it was sort of a little different. It was more folk, I would say, oriented with blues as well. I mean, I
Mhm.
really think if you look at really, I think, to me, let's talk about, for instance, subgenres, right?
Mhm.
So you had rock, you had the rock genre. Everyone kind of understood the rock in the 50s, 60s, up until the late 60s. It was just rock.
Sure.
I think when you got to the late 60s, when it came to, say, came to Woodstock. I think really Woodstock is when you saw, it was probably, it wasn't just obviously this phenomenon in terms of it was this massive big festival, and that personified the whole time, how the times were in '69. It also started bringing these sort of bands, these rock bands together, and they weren't all in the same vein. You
Right.
had a lot of subgenres. So, for instance, we had, Santana, right? You had rock mixed with Latin music. Now you had
Mhm.
world music coming involved with it. You had Sly and the Family Stone, where you had soul, gospel, and funk inspired rock.
Right.
You had the proto metal, heavier blues stuff with band like Mountain. You had the psychedelic LSD sound inspired bands like Jefferson Airplane. Even had a doo-wop rock band with Sha Na Na. So you really had
Wow.
all these, you had all these sort of, subgenres was starting to sort of sprout out now with rock, because
Right.
everyone was starting to incorporate other elements and other types of music with rock. And I think that's when we started to really see rock start to really take off in terms of everyone just kind of wanting to, do something different. And now this subgenre is now started to sprout up around
Yeah.
the, late 60s, early 70s.
No, I agree. I agree with all of that, man. I mean, it's again, I'm not trying to say that it ain't there. I certainly get that there are subgenres. I just know for me, I'm so it, here's my biggest problem with subgenres, I guess.
Mhm.
For subgenres, it basically limits what you listen to if you categorize everything.
I agree. Absolutely.
And I that's why I don't. That's
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many arguments I've had with people when there's one stupid band, is a more modern band, Slipknot.
Mhm. Okay.
People will argue with you all day long that Slipknot's not a metal band.
I don't know how they would do
They
that.
will
That's
argue
ridiculous.
all day long that they're not metal.
Well, what do they say they are?
Just rock?
No.
Or some stupid subgenre of like
Well,
horror metal or something. They
they
won't.
usually consider. I think a lot of people consider it new metal. That's what they
They're
usually.
new metal, or
Mm.
and to me it's just metal. It's heavy as fuck. It's I mean it's really heavy vocally. It's heavy with guitars. It's got great monstrous percussion in it. It's heavy.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
heavy.
it's really heavy, super heavy.
I mean, dude, honestly, if you put them up against some of the forebearers of the heaviest metal, I mean,
Mhm.
what's heavier, Slipknot or Black Sabbath? Slipknot or Metallica?
Slipknot. I
Slipknot
agree.
or
Mhm.
Megadeth. I
Mhm.
would say Slipknot's heavier than all those bands.
I agree. Absolutely. Vocally, they are. I mean, riff wise, they are. No
Yeah.
doubt. No, I totally agree. I think a big thing, another reason why I think you started seeing the subgenres come about too, um, was because it really was driven through sort of developed over time through fashion and stylistic elements as
Mhm.
well, right?
Sure.
In late '60s and '70s, obviously you had in the UK, you had that glam rock steam there, right? Where you had it really kind of started with David Bowie. He started bringing. I think he was one of the ones that really started bringing this now theatric and a character to the stage. And
Mhm.
it wasn't really almost so much more about the music anymore. There was all this theatrics around it.
Sure.
Yeah, like I said, you had with the Ziggy Stardust and all that. You also it sort of had that shock value too with the gender bending thing he had going on. Obviously we then started seeing Alice Cooper he became now a character as well when he got big. The Who did Tommy right around that time as
Sure.
well. So I think you started having, it wasn't just like these four guys getting up on a stage anymore and just playing music and whatever came out. Oh, great. That sounds awesome. Right now it's like, okay, now we're bringing in now the fashion aspect to it. Like I was saying, they had the glam with the T-Rex and Slade and all those guys,
Right.
and everything. Then it started morphing into punk rock, right? In the '70s, you started in the late '70s, you had punk into the early '80s. So I think people were also using genres, especially the labels, especially any of the media were using the labels. We're using fashion to sort of create genres to sort of separate and sort of market and sort of I guess
Yeah.
I mean I don't think it was a purposeful division, but it was just a way. I think it's just a marketing tool that I think a lot of labels and a lot of the music business people use it to, and the journalists as well. Obviously they were a big part of it because if they didn't like a certain subgenre, they'd trash it to pieces and so
Yeah.
forth. So,
But the
yeah.
unfortunate thing with the journalists, and I'll say this as somebody that has been a journalist for a lot of years, and
Mhm.
I've probably done it myself and don't even realize it, but a lot of times if it comes out during a certain era and they don't like it, they just call it whatever subgenre they don't like the most.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Which that
Good point.
really
Very good point.
blows. That really
Mhm.
blows. I mean, what was there any band that wasn't a metal band that was a rock band in the 90s that wasn't called grunge, especially the ones that sucked?
Oh yeah.
All of them.
No, all of them.
All
Or
of them
or post grunge. They went from
are
grunge
post
to
grunge.
post grunge. Yeah, that's one of the worst. See, I think the worst thing I hate with the subgenres, anything that's
Yeah.
hardcore, post grunge. It
Just
just
stop it.
means it's just silly. It's just like okay, it's
Yeah.
what is it? It has elements of it, so you're just gonna call it post. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Well,
It's silly.
and that's the whole thing is, and again, this is where I get lost with subgenres all the time. Everything has elements of everything else.
Mm,
I mean, let's pull a bullshit band like Creed.
okay.
I'm not a fan. You're not a fan. But what are they? Are they truly grunge? Or are they rock? Or are they rock grunge? Are they
Mhm.
post grunge, pre rock? Or, I mean, they have elements of all that stuff in there. They have
No, you're right.
elements of metal, they have elements of rock, they have elements
Mhm.
of grunge.
Yeah.
They have all these different elements to them.
Mhm.
A band like even like Nine Inch Nails. Now, certainly, a Nine Inch Nails is definitely industrial.
Mhm.
I won't say that they're not. They have that industrial thing, but they're metal as fuck if you've ever seen them live.
Mhm.
And if songs like March of the Pigs and stuff, you
Sure.
can't say that's not metal, like
Mhm.
straight up, almost thrash metal.
Mhm.
So to try and put them in a corner and say, well, they're industrial metal and that's it, and they're in the same boat with White Zombie and Rob Zombie and Mortis and
Mhm.
and all these I mean, then you start going down the rabbit hole and okay, where does that line stop of
Well, yeah.
industrial? Is Rob Zombie truly industrial, or is he metal with industrial elements?
Yeah.
No,
you're right.
and that's where they lose me all the time. Metallica. Certainly, if you listen to the first two albums, that's a thrash band. Certainly, if you listen to Load or Reload or Lulu or whatever, that's not a thrash band. So what is Metallica? Are they thrash? Are they?
I think Metallica is like its own genre right now. You know what I mean? They're their own thing. They don't. It's like people accept them in almost every genre, and which is obviously, and that's really unique because it's like, I mean, I just think about, like, for instance, and like I said, I know I keep going back to the fashion thing, but
sure,
I'm just going to take an example. I take let's look at a Motley Crue. Now, if you listen to, say, the first two albums, okay, especially Shout the Devil, all right, just listen to the music itself. Then don't think about how they looked at the time, or any of that shit, any of the videos. Okay, to me, it wasn't really that much different of a sound than, say, a band like Riot, say. Okay. I mean, band like Riot, Hard Loving Man. I mean, very similar sort of early '80s. Just a metal, hard rock and metal song.
Sure.
But because of the way Motley Crue looked, okay, because even thinking lyrically, well, those Shout the Devil wasn't all about, that was probably the last time before they got really, kind of hair metaled out, obviously. You know what I mean? Yeah, it got not that good, exactly. But I mean, I don't like so many times I hear these bands, some of these either new wave or hit British heavy metal bands, or just those early '80s metal bands before really hair metal came out and took over. And there wasn't that much of a difference musically. It was other things, like I said. So, to me, that's what it's obviously not based when people classify subgenre, when journalists do it, or whoever the label, executives do it, they're obviously taking into account not necessarily the music, but it's the look, it's the kind of bands they're playing with, obviously at the time, if they're in a certain scene. So really, to me, it's never described the music. I think when you think subgenre, when you think, say, death metal, you have this picture in your head of what death metal is. When you say any subgenre, you just have this picture because you're picturing it. You're not going, oh, it's the sound. You're picturing the visual. You're picturing the fashion and the style of that scene, especially back in the '80s and 70s, '80s, and even '90s. I think now it's a whole different world, but. I mean, let's take hair metal, all right? I mean, let's just start with there. Let's go there, right? So hair metal, all right? The genre that nobody wants to be associated with, right?
Sure.
Mainly because why? It implies that it was fashion over music substance.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's called hair. I mean, hair metal.
Yeah.
And many bands they will have, hair metal were never, and the thing about that, what sucks for hair metal bands, I unfortunately, because there's a lot of, great bands that will label hair metal that, Cinderella, for a great example. That to me are not, they weren't that type of metal.
All right, I'm gonna stop you right there on Cinderella. Cinderella has bitched and moaned about this thing forever. Cinderella did it to themselves.
Well, they did it for that cover. Absolutely. Worst cover ever, Night Storm's cover. Terrible.
Yeah, but that's why they're considered hair metal.
Well, once again, it's the visual, it's the fashion, it's not to do with the music.
The bands, I don't see them as being falsely classified because they wanted to be at that time because they were trend jumpers, or as they proved with their Heartbreak Station record, where once it started being uncool to be a hair metal band, then all of a sudden they're wearing jeans and flannels and
they all did
singing country songs.
True.
I mean, that's what Cinderella did. They turned into a country rock band up by Heartbreak Station.
True.
And so they were always a trend jumper band. I'll tell you a band that I really think got really fucked over by being into the hair metal genre, and it still kills this band, Tesla.
Okay. Yeah.
Sounded like it, never really looked like it.
Yeah.
But the only reason they were considered a hair metal band, the years they came out.
The years.
Because they didn't look like there are no glammed up spandex wearing Tesla pictures.
No, but if you listen, but at the same time, musically, they weren't that different, especially the first record. They weren't. I don't think they were that like. They were a little different, obviously. Yeah, they had more of just like just a rock, vibe to them. They didn't really have much like, but some of the songs sounded. They had that same sound. It was, the same sort of production at that time. Yeah, the guitar,
sound,
exactly, guitar sound. Yeah,
and
you
and
know,
and Jeff Keith's voice was certainly in
yeah,
that Cinderella Britney Fox thing.
exactly. The big choruses.
Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, it was very similar in that way.
I just look at them though and think, man, you know, when you see that and you see it lined up at a show with Great White and the Bullet Boys, you're like, what the hell? This is not
Yeah.
at all. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'd much rather see them going out with the Black Crows.
I agree.
You know,
Well,
who's
that's a good.
another band that got
A
put in
great
hair
point.
metal.
Well, that is a great one, but they were never able to escape the hair metal label. They were
Well,
able to do it because once again, it's because of the time. They came out in
a
'89,
little later, yeah.
and that's what it was. I think Tesla was out around '87, '88. So they still, to me, '89 is when it was starting to kind of, I mean, I remember just even watching, I mean, when MTV, obviously it was all hair metal, but they started playing Tesla or, I mean, not Tesla, Black Crowes or Social Distortion. They started to sort of mix in some of these other rock bands that had a little bit of different style to them. I mean, it wasn't really taking hold just yet, but
Sure.
but you're right. I mean, Tesla is a good example, I think. But I mean, Black Crowes, excuse me, is a great example.
And the
Yeah,
thing with the Crows too, unlike all these other bands, the Crows said it from day one that they weren't that. The Crows, I can remember reading interviews in like Hit Parade or whatever, and they were like, "We are not part of this crew."
true.
They said it from day one.
They did. Mhm.
And then when they put out their second album, they went out of their way to prove musically that they were not.
They
I
definitely
don't
did.
know if you remember that whole thing with the second album, the Southern Harmony or whatever
Mhm.
it is, Great Southern Companion, whatever that album's called.
Mhm.
But I remember it was such a big deal that they went out of their way to make their own clothes, like Amish guys, because
Yeah.
they wanted to totally set the
Away from
precedent that
themselves.
they were not a fashion trickster type of a band.
Yeah.
That
Well,
they were everything that the industry did not want them to be.
yeah. Well, at that point, it was full blown, especially MTV. It was full
Yeah.
blown Warrant and Slaughter, and I remember, Chris Robertson. I remember did that thing that he particularly would pick fights
Yeah.
with some of those guys. I remember he did it with Mark Slaughter. He
Mhm.
told him, "Oh, I could see him and running around the hotel room, girls chasing him in his underwear, drinking a Coors Light." I remember just like fucking, it was hilarious. And so they deliberately, they were deliberately, definitely trying to, I mean, they did. I think they were able to do it,
Well,
separate themselves.
hey, you know what the proof is? The proof is of that? They're the only ones from that era that are still playing for fucking 18,000 people.
That's a good point. That's true.
You know?
By themselves, being headliners. Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
mean, every other hair band you want to mention is
Mhm.
playing your local House of Blues or smaller.
Yeah, true.
Or
Mhm.
some casino somewhere that just goes for nostalgia bucks.
Mhm.
I mean, are there any, I guess Poison, but Poison and Motley Crue are the anomalies,
Mhm.
I guess. I mean,
Yeah, you're right. They are. I mean, Motley Crue, obviously, because Motley Crue, they kind of
first.
started. They were the first ones,
First, yeah.
exactly. And
And
Poison was able to really be that first MTV
yeah.
straight band where they, it was all about, like I said, no substance musically. They were the epitome of hair metal.
And
Yeah.
Poison, but even Poison,
Well, they grunged
they
up. They tried to.
they got rid of the look too. I mean,
Well, they had to. They had to.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that look died.
Yeah.
They became just like we were saying with Tesla. They became a country rock band too. Half of their shit, Something to Believe In. That's a
Yeah.
country song.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Totally
Is.
I mean, come on. And now, I mean, when is the last time you saw Bret Michaels without a cowboy hat on? He
Well,
clearly wants to be a country guy.
Well, he tried to be. I mean, he's done it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Always
of course.
is. So, I mean, yeah, they can't get away from it because like Cinderella, they went even further full bore into it at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, those are the two exceptions to the rule. Every other one of those bands, Doc and Rat, Danger, pick one, who
Doesn't matter.
any of those bands, Trickster, they all play for 5 to 1,000 people now.
Well, they play. There has to be 3 or 4 of those bands playing together in order to draw the
Yeah,
crowd.
in
That's
order
the
to
key.
get a decent crowd because it's just
Exactly.
it's not gonna work anymore. It did,
Mhm,
all half their audience has switched to country and the
mhm.
other half is dead.
Exactly. Yeah, no doubt. And then of course now we'll move into the grunge, right? Now,
Yeah,
now this is where I think grunge in the '90s to me is where things really got interesting in terms of genreification and
sure.
subgenres and all that. I mean, you had the same formula of sound and fashion, and that had held firm because now you have the grunge, not just the sound, but like I said, the fashion as well, right? But it
Mhm.
also became with the flannels and the jeans and long hair. But now it also became sort of regional since the sound and the bands that were in, Compass Grunge were basically just about most of them were out of Seattle. And Seattle sort of became the new LA Sunset Strip where
Mm,
everybody was moving there to try to make it. I mean, Smashing Pumpkins, yeah, they're out of Chicago, but they moved to Seattle
right?
to get discovered and everything. So everyone, like I said, they had their uniform. So there was a look, but also the lyrical content now. Now it's like, okay, obviously most rock and metal between maybe late '70s and '80s was all, '80s was all decadence, and now '90s, which with grunge was all depression. The decadence was
Right.
in was out, and depression was in, and I really think it started to get silly because obviously it was like, okay, it still always amazes me how it went from hair metal and really just did this complete 180 almost overnight to just a completely. I mean, I almost think it just had to be purposely done by the MTVs and by the labels. I mean, it wasn't like it just sort of naturally occurred that way. It did.
No,
It was
no.
deliberately done. MTV saw people weren't tuning in. What's gonna I guess they saw they put out some I guess I don't. To me, it always amazes me how really Seattle even just got as big as it did. Because to me,
Well,
it seemed like, and I know people said it was bubbling up for years, but to me, it just happened overnight for most people, at least my
yeah,
age. I was a little bit younger. I was only in high school at that time, but
yeah, I mean, there were definitely markers that told you that it was gonna change.
uh,
Like, Bad Motorfinger as an album
uh,
was so different
oh yeah,
from everything that was and I can remember playing that from friends because I was into that, right? I mean, I was in even before that. I was in with the
you're loud in love,
Louder
yeah,
Than Love record.
mm,
But when Bad Motorfinger came out, it was like, wait, this sounds nothing like anything I've heard. And yet it's probably better than everything I'm hearing now. And it
mm,
was, and again, it was the combination of a great vocalist doing something that we had not heard in a long time and weird guitars. Kim Theo's guitars are very odd on that record.
mm,
So that record to me, I know everybody credits Nirvana and whatever, and Nevermind's a good record, but for me, I like Nevermind. It's a good record to me. But Bad Motorfinger was really kind of that
mm,
bridge between it was heavy enough to please the Metallica people. It
yeah,
had
mm,
enough qualities of 80s type stuff to please the hair metal people, and it was different to please people that hadn't quit,
mm,
and there were other bands that were similar to that that were coming along too. One that I always reference, and it didn't go anywhere, but was this band Last Crack.
oh yeah, that's right,
Last Crack was another band that
absolutely,
was very, very odd,
very different, yeah,
very, very not like everything else that was coming out, but heavy and lyrically deep and really depressive, and
mm,
was like, wow. I mean, I can remember when Energy Mine came out, I was like, man, is this I thought that was going to be the band that took over the entire world.
mm,
And just because it was so different, and between that and Bad Motorfinger, you started hearing things, and then even at that time, even before Nirvana was forced down everybody's throat, there was all these other little bands that you started hearing about. You didn't really hear them that often, but like Screaming Trees.
Screen
I
Trees, Mother
remember,
Love Bone,
yeah,
yeah,
I remember Mother Love Bone was another one. That record
mm.
was a lot of the 80s people liked that record. Didn't love it, but
Well, because it derived a little bit from the glam. You
yeah.
know what I mean? It had a little bit of glam to it. Just like Alice in Chains had a little bit of that glam when they started, and it just sort of and even in LA at that point, you had Jane's Addiction, coming up. They were in the late 80s there too, and they had that sort of, I mean, it was more of a funk oriented thing. But it had a little bit of like, I mean, obviously the style and the fashion
Right.
was definitely more towards the glam stuff than it was towards any kind of hard rock or metal tough guy stuff, any sort of thrash or extreme type of music sort of style.
Sure.
But in terms of the fashion was, but yeah, no, it's just the '90s. Yeah, to me, the '90s were really when things just got, I think, were just ridiculous. I mean, we can even go into like metal. I mean, and just even before we go to that, I mean, yeah, just sticking on the grunge, like a Pearl Jam. See, this is my thing with genres, and I think we've had this discussion before, me and you, about when you look at the big four of grunge, right? You have obviously Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Pearl Jam. I
Sure.
think everyone will say those are the big four. Now, the one that sticks out to me and always did, even back then, that I'd never understood was Pearl Jam. Different sound than any other band musically in grunge. They didn't really have the down-tuned, deep, heavy guitars,
Yeah.
Sabbathy type of sound like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden did. Nirvana was obviously more punk based, but like I said, heavy guitars, a lot of angst. Pearl Jam, it was like I said, it was a little bit more
You're a rock
soulful. It's just a rock band. It was just
Yeah.
like a soulful rock band.
The only thing that they had in common with all those other bands, and I agree with you. I never understood why Pearl Jam was considered this.
It's because they were Seattle. That's the only reason.
Well,
Yeah.
Seattle, and they were depressing. They're-
Okay, yeah, that's true.
The songs,
That
the
is true.
songs were definitely somber.
Mhm.
There wasn't a whole lot of, hey, this is a great time to be alive. Everything was
Mhm.
Jeremy spoken, and now he shot up the class.
Mhm.
I mean, that was the message, was
True.
depressing, and I think they lumped them in there. But dude, there's a reason. And again, Pearl Jam, another one, separated from all the other bands.
That's what's amazing, and they became the biggest one, really.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
I mean, the other ones, if the singers hadn't died in all the other bands, they would not be at the level of Pearl Jam. No
Yeah,
way.
I don't think they would either. And I mean, obviously, I think there's other reasons why Pearl Jam was able to do that in terms of, like, as we've seen over the years, they just really, and one they always give them credit for is how they dealt with their music, not making, after Jeremy, they saw what happened. They didn't want to do any more videos. They just kept it all in house. They released their own records, no videos on MTV. And I always gave them credit for. I'm not a huge fan of them musically. I always give them credit for doing what they did in turn. And I think that's one of the reasons I think they were able to survive and thrive, I should say, on their own, without any mainstream help and any major label help. And like I said, I know not many bands could do that, but yeah, I mean, obviously Soundgarden would still be, but yeah, even before Chris Cornell died, yeah, they were selling out big arenas, but they weren't selling out. I mean, it's just usually big clubs, big venues. They weren't selling out arenas like Pearl Jam does.
No, not at all. No. I mean, I know. Yeah, I've seen all four of the big four, and yeah, none of them consistently drew. Like, even Nirvana. I saw Nirvana at the height, and to sell a room. Now, I saw them out there on New Year's Eve. I think it was 1990 or 91. It was either 91 into 92 or 90 into 91, but it was them and the Chili Peppers, and I forget who the third band was, but it was them and the Chili Peppers was the show. And that show wasn't sold out. And that was them and the Chili Peppers. And the Chili Peppers were on Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Oh, wow. Yeah, huge. Yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of bands that don't quite fit into a genre.
Well, yeah. Once again, well, I mean, there was that little funk metal genre they had for a little while there in the late 80s, early 90s. You had Faith No More, you had Red Hot Chili Peppers, you had Fishbone.
Suicidal on some level, even though they were heavier.
Yeah, you're right. They when Trujillo came in, they started doing some funk elements in on the Lights Camera Revolution album. It's true. But yeah, I mean, so you had that. You had the early Korn band, LAPD. They were funk metal. They were signed on one of those labels that was signing those bands. Jane's Addiction was kind of considered funk metal. So there was sort of that thing out of LA for the most part that was coming out. But yeah, I know what you mean. No, exactly. They were kind of, well, once again, and then like I said, speaking of that, and this is once again with the goofy 90s and the subgenres, right? You had, well, there's two of them that always, kill me. Groove metal. So groove metal, all to me, groove metal is just more mid-tempo thrash
Yeah.
or metal. That's it. I mean, okay, so things slow down a bit. It wasn't so fast and thrashy, but that's all it is. I mean, the Machine Head, Sepultura, Prong, Pantera, that's all it really was just mid-tempo thrash with riding the so-called, the quote-unquote money riff, as Phil and always says. Yeah, you basically just took a really sick riff and just made that the song. And that's what these bands were doing. But the one that always kills me, obviously, is alternative. Okay, the alternative genre. Now,
you mean the catch-all for anything that's not 4/4-timed rock?
Exactly. Well, exactly. It was just a thing that, like, I think the labels and MTV, everything was just like, how do we genreify this? We can't. Well, let's just lump it all together and call it alternative. Since obviously rock, it was so huge in the mainstream during the 90s, every label was trying to also find the new Seattle, which they couldn't find. So until then, it was like, well, we're going to go to different parts of the country like they did and pick off some bands here and here in the scene. Let's see if them stay stick. But they did all sound a little differently. So let's go ahead and just lump it alternative, post-grunge, that crap. You know what I mean? And then let's just throw it under one roof. And I remember the ultimate was when I saw this thing on MTV News. I remember it was a show going on in New York. And I remember Fred Schneider from the B-52s was emceeing it. And they were playing it too.
The Love Shack Baby.
Yeah, exactly. Him going up there and he's like, okay, and next up now is Prong. And it's just like, wait, Prong is playing with fucking the B-52s? So it's like, it's just like, it was just getting ridiculous. And of course, you then had Lollapalooza where they tried to do that even more. Let's just fucking conglomerate every band that has a electric guitar sound and call it rock, and then let's put them all together and try to, so I mean, yeah, to me, I think the most ridiculous genre of all time is alternative.
Yeah, because the funny thing with alternative is it was such a hodgepodge of crap that they would adopt bands from other genres and just kind of call them, well, they're alternative and grunge, or they're alternative and pop, like
exactly.
Dude, I can remember going and seeing back when I was on WMMS, we put on a show. Not we, but the station put on a show, and I had to go work it. It was called Buzzard Fest, and it was. At that time, WMMS had stopped being the rock station and was the alternative rock station.
Oh, so there you go.
So we were the alternative rock station. And I'm out at this show, and this show was the biggest lump of shit ever. It was like, it was No Doubt played it. And I like No Doubt. And I did get really fucked up with those guys. I was hanging out with those. And certainly Gwen Stefani at like 22, it did not suck to be.
That was pretty fun. Yeah.
That was pretty fun. But it was such a hodgepodge of, it was like Meredith Brooks and No Doubt and 311 and was a Finger 11. It was all these bands that made no sense to be playing with each other on this one show. And it was like, why am I here? And I hated it. I hated alternative, whatever. Whenever I heard on the radio we're going to play alternative, goodbye. That's when I quit listening to the radio.
Well, yeah. Well, that you're right. And that was sort of, I don't think it was the death of radio, but it didn't help. When you see Metallica playing, a festival and you got Fatboy Slim and the Wallflowers and Prodigy, it's like, where the fuck you going with all this shit?
Right, exactly.
And that was it. There was no direction. There's absolutely no direction.
It was the worst. And dude, here in Cleveland, I'll just tell you, here in Cleveland, all of the straight up rock stations went away. They all became alt rock. Everything was, one station was called the Alternation. One station was your alternative rock favorites. MMS was the home of alternative rock or whatever it was. I mean, it was just, you had your classic rock station where you get your fill of Van Halen and Pink Floyd, or 4 or 5 different alternative rock stations. It was that's when I jumped out because, and the worst part was that bled into a lot of the bands that I liked, that I was still liking at the time. That was when Bruce Dickinson decided he wanted to be alternative rock, and he released Skunk Works and Balls to Picasso. And that was when Warrant decided they were an alt rock band, and they released Belly to Belly and Ultraphobic, and Dokken released Shadow Life, and they all wanted to be alternative because that was what it was happening in all the cities. And it was, you want to talk about a bad collection of music. If you just take anybody that formerly was in another genre and you pick out their albums between 1995 and 1997 and put them in a blender, you will get what I'll just call the new genre called shit metal. That's, dude, think about that time period, 96 to 98. Metallica, you get Load and Reload.
Yeah.
Warrant, you got Belly to Belly and Ultraphobic. Dokken, you got Shadow Life.
Well, and he was even going the other way. You had Megadeth doing Risk.
Yeah, Risk from Megadeth. I mean, dude, every band, every band that had success in the 80s or the 70s was now trying to be an alternative rocker.
Yeah.
And it was just, remember Danzig with Danzig 5, the Satana Devil.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that record was
alt
terrible.
Industrial.
Well, I mean, that was the thing too. Industrial, then, it's like that's one of the things that killed me, because now industrial was a big part of alternative now, right? Because like you were talking about earlier about 9 Inch Nails, right? They couldn't necessarily, even though they had the metal attitude, they had some guitars. It was, since it was all electronic music mostly, obviously they were trying, and I couldn't stand. I'm sorry, I know, like I said, I couldn't stand when you had 9 Inch Nails. Prodigy was being classified as metal. Prodigy. I mean, come on, dude. It was a freaking techno band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, when they tried to do that too in the late 90s, I remember even when I was interning at Fear Factory. I mean, not Fear Factory, at Roadrunner. You had bands like Fear Factory, doing all the super, industrial stuff. Yeah, the remix albums. And then they brought on the band called Junkie XL, which those guys were great dudes. And I met them, and they were coolest guys, but, that they were basically, that sound was huge in Europe. I mean, that was a very big thing in Europe, where Europe loved their techno and loved their metal.
Sure.
But we didn't necessarily, didn't really happen too much here in the United States. It was mostly you either into the techno stuff. If you liked, Prodigy and 9 Inch Nails and Bile and all these bands, you like that stuff. You'd go to those goth clubs, you'd watch those bands. If you like metal, you go to the club and watch a metal show. It wasn't
industrial did not take off here. I mean, certainly we had 9 Inch Nails, which is biggest of the big of that genre. But really, who's number 2?
Probably like a Ministry or a White Zombie at that point.
Okay,
right? But they were a metal band that just added out. They just added techno elements, industrial elements.
That's what I mean. I mean, 9 Inch Nails for whatever. I mean, I still think of them as a metal band, but ultimately they were a band that was created on a computer, doing just that. Is there anybody else that was big? That was big. I mean, I can name little bands, 13MG or bands like that, or Scold or Tim Scold.
No, you're right. There wasn't any no, because like I said, it was one of those. That was one of those. They were such a huge band that everyone was trying to. I mean, you could say early. Well, even say they only had an industrial kind of tinge to them, was early Marilyn Manson, but no, I mean, not really. You know what I mean? It's really they were definitely in a league of their own. There's no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, that's we keep going to these same themes. I guess there is a theme to all this. If you were the innovator, then you generally got to stick. Because Trent Reznor can still sell any venue he wants to sell. Even today, and he hasn't done anything worth a shit in a long time.
Yeah. Well, it's funny too, because it's stuck, but really is there? I mean, really, the thing is that sound sticking? No.
Oh, no.
I mean, really, we don't even know. I mean, when we talk to Amir Rock from Orgy and Julian K, right? We're talking to him a little bit about that last year. And I mean, he's saying, there's really still a lot of these great industrial bands. He was giving us some, but I haven't heard of these bands. I'm sure some of them are good, but it's one of those things where that sound too, it's like, I think it's one thing, being younger, I was so, and listen, we're still, both of us, we always say we're so hungry for new music and everything, but it's like, I can't kind of go back and listen to that stuff again. Like, and get into it or try to like really give it a chance like I used to. I mean, same can be said for another subgenre, which is like it became the '90s version of hair metal, which was nu metal. A sound that it's hard when I think of nu metal. If I heard like a brand new band that's doing nu metal, I can't get into them.
Well,
You know
dude,
what I mean?
we did that. We did it. Me and you did that with we got fed
Mhm.
one to cover. And
Yes,
I sent you the video and we both laughed our asses off at
passes off to that one.
how horrible the music was,
Horrible,
only worse by how horrible the video was.
terrible,
And
terrible.
I'm not even, I know the name of the band, but I'm not going to say the name. I don't want to
Yeah, yeah,
trash
yeah.
the band. We have
Sure,
no
yeah,
reason
no
to
problem.
trash the band,
Yeah,
but but they were
that's
terrible.
terrible, terrible.
And literally, they were an updated Limp Bizkit. That's what they
But
were.
bad. Well, that's the thing is, like I said, if Limp Bizkit and Stuck Mojo and Korn or whoever,
Yeah.
those new metal bands, they came out with a new record right now. Yeah, I'd give it a chance.
Hell yeah.
Non-point, whatever. But if you're just a brand new band, like I know there's that band now. I mean, I don't know too much of them. It was a Tetrarch. I think they're kind of
Oh, Tetrarch, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I know they're trying. I mean, the bottom line is that sound just like hair metal. All right. If a band comes out right now trying to dress up like a hair metal band, try to sound like that, it's. I mean, musically one thing, because it's just basically blues based rock,
Yeah.
Van Halen tinged rock, hard rock. I listen to it, but like new metal. I mean, it's just one of those sounds, just like industrial. If you're new and you're like, yeah, I got this new band, we're new metal.
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard for me to give you a shot. I only listen to the bands that were there. That it's sort of like I said, just like the hair metal stuff. No one's going to listen to a new hair metal band, but they will listen to new music from an older hair metal band.
Sure.
Just new metal's in the same category.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And if you're coming out trying to have the look of the old style, you're just dead.
You're
dead
dead
on arrival in any
Exactly.
genre. I don't care if you're Crazy Licks or Crash Diet that are still trying to look like the 80s rock guys. I don't care if you're these bands that this band that we saw recently that's trying to look like
I know.
Fred Durst, or I don't even know what he was trying to look like with the green hair and what. Oh, that was just brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal. Yeah.
But dude, I don't care if you're a mask band coming out trying to look like Kiss. No, it's over.
I agree.
It's you gotta. It's one of the biggest problems we have with music today is there's nobody out there just trying to find their way, find their mark.
There's no innovation.
Yeah, everybody's trying to find the other guy's mark and use that to get them where they want to get to. And it's like, dude, stop it. That's why, my playlist, and I'm pretty sure your playlist too, is full of a lot more bands like, I don't know, Void Vader comes immediately to mind.
Sure.
A band that does their own thing, and does it remind you of some stuff? Absolutely. But you can tell that's only just because that's what those guys listened to when they were coming up.
Exactly.
I can promise, and I don't know these guys real well. I think you know them better than I do, but the Void Vader guys never sat in their rehearsal room going, you know what? We need to really get a little more Machine Head riff here, and we need to get a little more of a vocal that sounds like this guy here. They just play what they play based on the influence.
Well,
and that is missing today. Everybody's stuck, like we were saying, everybody's stuck in these genres. Everybody wants to be the next Killswitch Engage or the next Slipknot or the next Metallica. And it's like, dude, how about you be the first?
Exactly.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because a lot of times the music is secondary. If you look at a lot of these subgenres that get tooled on a lot, like hair metal, like nu metal, it's because of the fashion more than anything else. I mean, sure, definitely some vocally stuff. I mean, for both, obviously a lot of cheesy lyrics from the hair metal stuff back in the day. Nu metal was all kind of, I don't want to get into that. That's a whole different, a whole other thing itself too with the nu metal. But same thing. It was mostly, I think, because of the presentation of it. It wasn't, if you look at the genres that have staying power, that have continued to pump out. I mean, bands over decades, progressive, doom, the stoner, the classic metal. That even with the new wave of British heavy metal, you got the new wave of traditional heavy metal, thrash, death metal. I mean, these musical styles that many times they don't really. It has not really to do much with the style. It's just jeans and t-shirts type of stuff. A little bit of fashion, but nothing over the top. Yeah. So, and I think that's really, the main, I think, thing about, for a sound to stay and what people want to continue to still play that kind of music going forward is because it doesn't overdo it with all the aesthetics, like I said, all the clothing and all the over the top lyrics and all that shit, the videos and everything. It's really in the substance of the music. And like you said, it's too many people are trying to not be their own thing.
Yeah.
It's one thing taking it we'll use Void Vader again. Yeah, like you said, if you listen to Void Vader, if someone says, "Hey, what do they sound like?" I'm like, I can't really tell you. Like it's hard to pinpoint it. They've got elements of different shit all over the place, which is what makes it really great, and it's unpredictable. And that's, at least I love that shit. I like shit that's unpredictable.
Well, look, dude, even when I was just now trying to throw examples with Void Vader of what they're not doing, I can't even pick anything because I don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Down what. There's nothing to pin down. There's and that to me makes an exciting band. I can't wait till they put out another release because I have no fucking idea what it's going to sound like.
Absolutely.
I have no idea. And that is exciting. It's one thing if we all have our favorite bands from yesteryear. Whoever those bands are. And those bands need to sound like what we remember, to be honest. We don't want them to really change, not too much. I don't want to get a Fear Factory record that sounds like Metallica.
Exactly.
I don't want that. I want just what Fear Factory did last year. I want a Fear Factory record that sounds like Fear Factory. I want Metallica to keep cranking out Hardwired stuff because at least that sort of sounds like Metallica. It doesn't sound like Reload or Lulu. I want when I want death metal, I want Cannibal Corpse to sound like Cannibal Corpse. Or 6 Feet Under to sound like 6 Feet Under. Great example. What Chris Barnes is doing now, I don't get it to save my life. It ain't what he's
used to doing
his career on. So, stay within your zone if you're an old band. If you're a new band, I'm going to tell you, you're going to fail every time if you steal too much from any band.
Absolutely.
If you want to be Tool, you're already failing. You're never going to be Tool because Tool as a band not only profited from their music, which I like them personally. I don't love them, but I like them a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you. Same thing here. Yep.
They also profited from they came out at the exact right moment to have a sound nobody else had that was different and long, and you can't do that today. It's the same reason that how many prog metal bands are there out there that you can just tell they're just trying to sound like Dream Theater. They're writing 11-minute songs. They really don't have any songwriting discipline. It goes nowhere. It's just long to be long with a noodler guitar player. And we hear these bands all the time, and none of them get any traction because Dream Theater's still out there. There's no hole in the ozone.
There's no void for it. Exactly. Yeah.
There's no hole for that. It's Dream Theater's still there to give them what they want. So, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's interesting, when with bands too, who have, what happens when you change your sound, right? So obviously bands start off first album or two, it might be what's cool at the time or what they, what they're influenced by, whatever. And you said in the bands that have after the first album too, a lot of bands have changed their sound, right? Just one, a couple comes to mind, but one of them that comes to mind, Sepultura. All right. Great example, right? The earlier stuff, real death, thrashy stuff, right? Well, they kind of grooved, it got groovy in the 90s. There's another band that's the band that's interesting because, unlike a lot of those other thrash metal bands that weren't able to kind of, do anything really in the 90s, they did it, but you said, I think the reason they did is because it was their own thing. You know what I mean? They got grouped, but then they added the tribal elements to it. They had their own unique, sound with that. But another band that comes to my mind is Clutch. Clutch is one of those bands too. And the reason why I love the bands like Clutch, I love like COC, another great example, right? Yeah. COC started out as a hardcore punk, a crossover band, they got big on what,
Albatross,
exactly. The Blind album and stuff. So it's like they changed so much, but I think, and that's a rare thing, but I think bands like that, the reason why I think those bands did well too is they didn't lump themselves into a scene and play with the same bands. That's why we see we're bringing up Void Vader. What's great? Well, what do we see about Void Vader? They play with all different types of bands. They're not limiting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they don't care if they go out and they play with, you know, a stoner sort of, a package because, or whatever, because why? Well, because, you know, you're going to be able to cross yourself over to other fans if you go out and take that chance.
Yeah.
And just separate yourselves in that way, because you're showing, to me, when you do that, when you do what Clutch does and what Voivader's doing now, you're going out and you're touring with these bands that don't sound like you, but they're in the rock and metal realm.
Sure.
You're already, by doing that, you're letting everybody know we are our own thing. We're not tied down to a scene or to a genre or subgenre. You know, now, and I think more bands, if more bands did that, I think you would see not only more original music, but you see just a more burgeoning metal and hard rock scene across the globe is what you would see, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, dude, you bring up Clutch, and I'm not a Clutch fan. I just, Neil's voice just grates on me, which
I love it.
I mean, most people do. And it's weird, for as much as I like stoner rock, Clutch is that one band that just doesn't grab me. That being said, I certainly respect what they do, and they're real nice guys. I've met them a couple of times. They're really nice. And but dude, the first time I saw them, listen to this package. It was Pantera, Clutch, and Neurosis.
Wow, yeah.
That's all over the map, my
all
friend.
over the map. Yeah.
And that was a killer show.
That's a
killer show.
It sounds great right there. Yeah, exactly, man.
You know.
Yeah. It's like I said, I mean, the genre thing, it's, I mean, well, here's another thing too, right? Now we could take it a flip side. When you've got a band like, let's look at a band like Pantera. Now they went from, it's very odd. You went from a band like that. It went from sort of a glam background,
sure,
now to a full on sort of, like I said, a thrash grooves type of thing. But I also think something like that works well for them because they weren't really nationally known at the time. When they were a hair metal band, they were just playing certain circuits. But they wouldn't have been able to make that transformation if they were more well known. For example, like a band they toured with back then, Skid Row, right?
Sure.
A band like Skid Row, they were one of the only few, right, that went from that glam sound to really a more heavy and metal sound. Groove metal, heavy metal sound at that time. And they were probably the only band I could think of that did that. But they were already too pigeonholed into glam metal because all people could see is Sebastian Bach singing "I'll Remember You" on fucking MTV. They were never going to be. To me, they were never going to be able to make that full transformation. He also was known as as a chick, kind of guy. I mean, he was a good-looking dude, so he had that huge female fan base. That's on the flip side where a band tried to change. Where both those bands, Pantera and Skid Row, sort of the opposites, right? Yeah, Pantera was glam, and
and it's Skid Row to me is an absolute tragedy because I love them. I mean, I absolutely love. But the one album I never listened to is the first one. I couldn't give a shit about the Poppy album. I love Slave to the Grind like everybody does, and the Subhuman Race. That is a heavy record. I mean, the riffs. And the songs and Sebastian's voice, everything is just ripping heavy. But you're right. I saw that tour and it was over. I mean, I saw it at the Nautica stage here in Cleveland, which I think seats like 5,000 people, maybe.
Okay.
And if it was a 10th full, I'd be stunned.
Wow.
It was fucking empty. I mean, there was nobody at this thing. And that was right at the beginning of Subhuman Race. It was over. It was nobody. Yeah. They didn't release. I think the quote unquote hit was Into Another or something, which was like the one lame attempt to be still 80s.
Yeah.
And it just didn't fit. And I don't know. I mean, Skid Row had a lot of other problems, obviously, which is why there's, now playing, garages instead of sheds, but
sure,
but
I know,
but I mean, you're right. They were the one band that really did try to go the other way, and it just failed them miserably. And maybe that's why nobody else did.
True. No, you're right, because they were probably one of. Because if you think about a lot of those glam metal bands, the hair metal bands, I should say, when they did change their sound in the 90s, they didn't do it. They didn't do it to that extreme. They didn't up it up, to a heavier sound. It was mostly, like you said, they might have grunged it up, where slow it down a bit, obviously, make it a little more dark. But yeah, they didn't do what Skid Row did. I don't think anybody tried to do it. You're right. Maybe that's probably one of the reasons why some of those other bands were like, no,
Yeah, and dude, I guess in hindsight, it makes perfect sense to me why none of that worked. But at the time, I don't think anybody saw it. Was you can't take a band, whatever band you want to pick, and say, okay, well now all we sang about was getting laid and getting drunk for 10 years. Now all of a sudden we're going to sing about how depressed we are.
Exactly.
That's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
No. What Warrant on one of their records has a song called Sad Teresa. It's a ballad about some sad chick. It's like, dude, you guys were singing about licking the cherry pie.
Cherry pie. I mean, exactly.
And now you're talking about Sad Teresa and how she's depressed because you left. And stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. How record execs didn't see that and say, yeah, this is not going to work. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, yeah, record execs. I mean, that's a whole nother, shit. We can get into. That's a whole, because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't.
No, they don't. But the desperation that was going on, especially with the 80s, dude, when you pull some of those 80s records out, those 80s bands from the 90s, and look at the desperation. I think the all-timer, you believe it or not, we haven't even named the all-time worst one. And I'll put it out there for anybody to go out and look it up, was American Hardcore by LA Guns. On that one, which I'm sure you probably don't remember that record.
I don't remember it. No, I know the name, but I don't remember hearing it.
I'm going to challenge you to go and pull this one. You'll love it.
Okay, really?
First of all, they changed the name to the LA Guns instead of LA
Guns.
Oh,
right. Okay, interesting.
And they got a Phil Anselmo type singer to try and toughen their sound.
Yeah.
It is abysmal.
Really?
It is abysmal.
I got to go back and listen.
There's a ton of those examples. Lynch Mob, George Lynch put out Smoke This, his attempt to be Lynch or Limp Bizkit.
Yeah, I know that.
And he's doing new metal.
Yeah, to that extreme. Well, what's worse? See, to me, is it worse being something like that where you're going heavier, even if it's a bad attempt, or is it worse if you're weakening yourself more? You know what I mean?
Go from cowboy rock of Lynch Mob to rapping. You can't do it.
Yeah, that's too much. I know it's too big of a bridge to cross there.
It's the same as even though it was a different band officially, it's the same as Tommy Lee jumping from Motley Crue to Methods of Mayhem. It was never going to work. It was never going to be accepted as the only people that were going to listen to it in the first fucking place were Motley Crue fans. And the last thing they wanted to hear was Tommy Lee going off about rock the spot till you hit the cock or whatever the fuck he's singing. Nobody wanted to hear that. There was never an audience for it. And yet somebody paid money to produce it.
Yeah, but once again, I think, that's also, I mean, let's be honest. It's because it was Motley Crue, it was Tommy Lee. He was a Hollywood guy at that point, right? He was with Pam Anderson. So it's like, he wasn't just, the Motley Crue drummer. So I think, if you had a personality like that, and you were some guy into, you were at least going to get the chance to go, here, I'm going to put out some piece of shit. We'll put you on Ozfest. We'll put you on and just to keep your name out there.
See, that's the part where I had the problem. If he was just doing his solo thing, that's one thing. But he wasn't. He was still promoting himself as a metal guy. He was out on Ozfest on a metal tour doing, rap songs.
Yeah,
it was bad. It was and I know that was at the same time that like Crazy Town and Limp Bizkit and all that stuff was out, but it wasn't going to work. You can't take the drummer from Motley Crue and give him dreadlocks and call him a rapper now. That's just not going to work.
It's not going to. Well, I think what you try to do as a label, you're probably trying to think to yourself, well, yeah, it's not going to work with the traditional Motley Crue audiences and Tommy Lee fans. No, absolutely not. You're trying to do it, and you're trying to make it, for more of the modern, listeners who don't really maybe know that much about Motley Crue and Tommy Lee, because at that point, I mean, think about that. That was probably the worst period ever for Motley Crue.
Sure it
Right?
was.
Yeah, Generation Swine was out like right around that time, right? A little before that. It was terrible.
Yeah, that was terrible.
And so it's like they were sort of really irrelevant, for that time they were. So it was like, I guess, like I said, that to me is probably just knowing someone in the business that's
Sure.
just like,
Well,
okay, yeah, we're gonna hook you up. You know what I mean?
but to be honest, though, you
Uh,
just named another record that came out in that 96 to 98 realm too.
that was horrible. Exactly. Oh, like I said,
Generation
we could,
Swine, where they tried
yeah.
to change their sound to be a
Uh,
alt rock band.
well, all rock with industrial tips. I mean,
Oh.
just like they tried to do with the grunge with the self-titled record.
Yeah.
Same thing. Which, like I said, I think that's a really good record, actually. And so do
Sure.
you. I know you like that record
Love
too.
it.
Yeah, so do I. But once again, it just wasn't going to go over with, obviously at that time the Motley Crue name was still fresh. It was, everyone still remembered them. No one was going to ever accept them being anything other than, Dr. Feelgood and all that stuff. Girls, girls, girls. You know,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a very, the whole genre thing really is such a, I don't know what you'd call it, a phenomenon in a way. It's just
Right.
it's shitty. Obviously, like I said, I really wish people would just, listen. If someone
Sure.
just says it's hard, I mean, you could really just sit there and call something either metal or hard rock,
Yeah.
and then give someone, okay, it's hard rock in the vein of yada yada yada. Name a band or two, metal in the same vein of this. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Now talking about just, now getting into the last 20 years, because really, I mean, it's kind of funny how usually when we talk about like history, it goes up to like 2000 and things kind of
Yeah.
kaput because everything just changed then because of
Mhm.
technology and everything. So it was just a
Sure.
whole different industry. But when I think of subgenres, these days, I
Mhm.
mean, nobody has more subgenres in it than the fucking death metal shit.
Oh,
I
dude,
mean, how many subgenres is death metal gonna have? It's ridiculous.
it's ridiculous, and it's made it to where there's so many that none of them matter.
No, it doesn't. Exactly.
There's only
Yeah.
in my mind, there's only one subgenre of death metal that matters, and that is deathcore. Because deathcore as an overseeing genre
Mhm.
makes sense to not classify it makes sense to not classify bands that are doing deathcore with Immolation or Cannibal Corpse or whatever.
With the old school
I mean,
death metal, yeah.
they have a different sound.
It is, it is.
But all of this nonsense about, horrorcore
Oh,
and
that stuff, gorecore,
yeah,
yeah.
just stop.
Technical death metal. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just it's a little yeah, to me it's just I get it. Like if I hear a technical death metal, band, and then I don't know if I heard a gorecore and a horrorcore, what's the fucking difference? They're all singing about crazy fucking shit. You know what I mean? It's like it's all the same kind of sound.
right.
And maybe there is other little, obviously differences in it, but in the end, it's fucking death metal.
Yeah, of
Maybe
course.
melodic death metal that's different because of vocals. Okay, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I think that's what a lot of it's I guess that's really what separates these genres, these subgenres. I got my just in summary here is really it's vocal style, it's lyrical content,
Sure.
it's obviously maybe speed of the song and
Mhm.
fashion. You know what I mean? It's those I think four is what really. And I mean, and just like anything, you can do it with anything. But I really would hope. I mean, like I said, this modern day. The one thing I do like about now with metal, when you hear a band that's kind of new, that's a new band, and they're a metal band, you call it modern metal.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of understands that. Okay, it's 2010 to 2020 metal.
Yeah.
The modern sound. We don't have to get into all the fucking nuances now. It's a metal band.
Yeah.
So I do see a little bit of the subgenre thing sort of going to the wayside because for one, there are less labels and less executives out there making dumb fucking decisions
Right.
and shit for one.
Oh, and the biggest thing is there's less stores. If there was stores, then you have to put
Mhm.
shit on the shelf and you have to put it out in a way that makes sense. And alphabetical doesn't always make sense.
True.
A lot of
Mhm.
times it makes more sense to put all of the classic metal shit here and the
Mhm.
death metal shit here and the gore core over here.
Cool.
But without a store, without a brick and mortar store,
Mhm.
you don't really need as many subgenres anymore.
No, you don't. And what's funny is, we've like obviously all these bands we interview, man. What do they always say? Do they hate? the
They hate
fucking
it.
labels.
Yeah.
I mean, how many stoner bands they hate that fucking term. I mean, I don't blame them because half of these guys are saying like, dude, I don't even smoke weed. It's like, well, I'm not. We're just heavy rock. And that's what really stoner rock is. It's just
That's all
it's just it's like 90s heavy rock. That's all it really is. It's basically
rock
some
music
70s.
with Black Sabbath guitars. That's what it is.
Exactly. Bingo. Exactly. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So I mean, the good thing is, like I say, I think a lot of there's more choices now for bands because they're not held up by the labels and labels saying, we're putting you with this, on this package. You're playing with these guys. You're going to dress like them.
Right.
And that's the thing too. That shit. There was so much money behind these bands back then. They signed all that shit away. They had to do that. They had to go out and dress. I mean, even if you look back, we've talked about this a little bit before. Bands in the 70s that all of a sudden became MTV bands, ZZ Tops, Heart. I mean, all these bands, they didn't want to dress up and look like that. Jefferson Starship, and but they had to change because obviously the record labels were going, hey, Ann Wilson or Nancy Wilson, put on this fucking spandex. You're wearing that shit, or you have no fucking record deal. Bottom line, and they had to fucking do it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And I'm glad it's changing for the way it is now. I mean, even if nobody knows any of the bands that I like, I really don't care because
exactly. Yeah, I know.
I like the good music, and I don't need to. The only person I really talk about music with is you, and I don't really have to say, hey, did you hear that new deathcore grind math metal band? I don't have to do that. I can just say, hey, here's a band. Boom.
Math metal is another one. Like I said, the list is endless, with these subgenres. But
math.
Cool. Well, anyway, so I just in finalizing this episode, I would just say, I think what most of us say is fuck the damn subgenres.
Yeah.
It's all either hard rock or metal or heavy rock. I like those three: hard rock, heavy metal.
Absolutely.
So those lines. Keep it simple. Everybody should be doing what Void Vader and those bands are doing out there, playing with other bands. We was talking about that band Glitter Wizard that we interviewed. Same thing. They go play with punk, and that was a cool discussion I with them last year because he was explaining all the different if we go play with a metal band, it's like you guys suck, you're not metal enough, and so he was kind of giving us the sort of rundown of how it is playing with the different subgenres and stuff. But if it's up to guys like me and you, it's keeping it simple and go out and play. Like you said, we had Tanner, Madras played with Void Vader. I mean, two different style bands playing together. That to me is the way shit should be.
Exactly. Yeah. And for God's sakes, don't limit yourself by what somebody says is their label of a band. Just don't do it. Just listen to it. Just listen and make your decision all by yourself. I'll throw a name that nobody knows but me and you on here. Asotic.
Okay, yeah. That's coming up this week too.
And great interview, by the way. I just watched it again today. It's fantastic. But then because I was cutting it up for Heavy Metal Television, I went out looking for videos and I started really listening to some of their stuff. I was like, Jesus Christ, are these guys good?
Good.
Now, I don't even know what I would call them. Right now, as far as a subgenre, I'm not even going to try to put one on it.
No, I just call thrash. I mean,
thrash, metal, death. It has
thrash, death, black metal, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
A little bit of all of it into it, and it's just good. That's what it is.
That's it.
It's metal. It's heavy.
It's good. It's got elements of metal, of different types of metal. It's heavy. Yeah. Leave it at that. And that's
what else do you need?
Exactly.
So awesome. There we go. We'll end on
all
that.
right, man. Yeah, we'll end on that. Anything else we want to throw in there before we wrap this up?
Just visit us all the time, aftershockstv.com and cmspn.com. You can hit me at theclassicmetalshow.com or cameo.com/Chris.
Oh, that's right.
If you need some silliness thrown your way.
And be on lookout for the Chris Aiken Presents as well.
Yes, that's coming in January, and my laundry list of things.
Really? Well, I was going to see if you wanted to do another show. No, a different one.
Why not? Why not?
Well, I add another one to the 100 of them you do on your list, right?
Dude, I'm probably going to launch a second cameo for Judge Aiken. So I don't care, dude. It's all. Look, if I can find a way to make this stuff pay the bills, I'm in.
Yeah, right. Well, like I said, and if it's fun too on top of it, so that's
Absolutely.
the most important thing. That's more important
Absolutely.
too. Exactly.
That's the main reason. Because
that's the main reason
doing it.
Exactly. All right, man. Awesome. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks for listening.